Week 6 of American History Hybrid. This week we're going to take a look at the civil rights movement of the 1960s. After these notes, you should be able to answer the following questions. First, we're going to take a look at civil rights demonstrations and their use of nonviolent methods. We'll analyze why supporters push for civil rights bills and discuss influential factors of those bills and their passage. We'll also take a look at this Selma protest and how it led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We'll also take a look at the different philosophies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. We'll also identify the gains African Americans made through the 60s into the 70s, and we'll also take a look at a few landmark court case decisions in the 1960s. First, a little background history, a little bit of review. Now, the emergence of the movement, again, we look at fought back as slaves, resistance, and how far back do we go? We can go back to trimester 1 when we see slave revolts such as Nat Turner's revolt in the early 1800s. We also see the Jim Crow laws emerged in the Reconstruction era. Again, those laws will be a result of the South losing the Civil War, and they will, again, create laws that will discriminate against African Americans. We'll see school segregation by the Plessy versus Ferguson Act, the overturning of it in Brown versus Board in 1954, and we will also look at arguments for desegregation and, again, the negative impacts. And then we see the Chief Warren's decision, again, ruling that white racism was the root cause of race riots. Lyndon Brown, again, in Topeka, Kansas. I'm going to quickly make our way through this.
Do your children go to this school, ma'am?
No, they don't. They go to a religious school not far away.
Well, what is the reason for your presence on the picket line today?
I believe the children of the Bedford-Stuyvesant area deserve their own school. They shouldn't have to be bused and used as pawns by politicians.
All right, again, school segregation. A little background again. This is review. Again, we look at the Little Rock Nine, again, gaining entrance into Central High. And there's a picture of James Meredith. And the Montgomery bus boycott, which was a huge success, which we've already learned. Large part, the success was due to Rosa Parks and the backing of the MIA again. Other activities. We see sit-ins at Woolworth's lunch counter, and that was led by the SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Again, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was led by Stokely Carmichael, and they organized various sit-ins and nonviolent protests, as we just mentioned, the Woolworth's lunch counter.
Bland, the coffee weak, the atmosphere sterile. But the stools in this lunch counter are more treasured and more symbolic than any seat in a five-star restaurant. What was served up at this very counter was the sweet and satisfying taste of freedom. This was the main stage of one of the greatest dramas of the 1960s, the so-called sit-in civil rights protest.
Okay, and also we see the Freedom Riders.
This probably is the most significant thing that two people who are getting toward the end of their lives could do to hasten the time when in our own lifetime we might see America live up to its dreams.
We recruited the riders for the Freedom Ride by contacting all of our core chapters around the country. We were looking for a mix of black, white, young, middle-aged, older. We wanted to have one member of the clergy on the trip.
The Freedom Rides were trying to say to America, we are a diverse country. Let's act like a diverse country where every part of the diversity is equal and is treated equally.
Again, the Freedom Riders, they will integrate public facilities in a nonviolent manner, and their movement will be achieved, although through various struggles. And again, we see the bombing of Birmingham, and again, nonviolent protests turn into a violent retaliation, where we see, again, the incident in Birmingham. Firefighters turn their hoses on protesters, and then we also see evidence of a bombing in retaliation by white aggressors. Again, the demonstration at Birmingham, we see the again, letter from the Birmingham jail, and they staged children marches in protest to the violence used to suppress their nonviolent actions.
By far, the bloodiest battleground of the civil rights era was Birmingham. In the early 1960s, the town was a racial powder keg waiting to explode.
Birmingham was then the most segregated city in America, and it had the longest history of aggressive racial violence. Birmingham was called Bombingham by people in the civil rights movement because of this long chain of unsolved bombings of black homes.
Much of the violence was perpetrated by the Ku Klux Klan. As evidenced in the beating of the Freedom Riders, the city's law enforcement was known for its working relationship with the Klan.
The Klan had more influence perhaps in Birmingham than they did in a lot of the other southern cities, and I think that contributed to the Klan's sense of bravado, where they felt like they could get away with anything, that nobody would hold them accountable.
In this charged atmosphere, one of the cruelest of all acts of Klan terror occurred. The 16th Street Baptist Church was a symbol of the civil rights movement in Birmingham. The sacred chambers served as a staging point for demonstrations against segregated downtown public facilities. From the steps of the church, hundreds of black marchers, most of them kids, encountered the extreme force of Police Commissioner Bull Connor's attack dogs and high-pressure fire hoses. For radical segregationists like the Klan, the 16th Street Baptist Church became a special target. On a hazy Sunday morning in September of 1963, 4 young black girls attended Sunday school at the 16th Street Church. The day's Bible lesson was, "A Love That Forgives." The 4 girls moved to the basement to don choir robes when suddenly a noise shot through the church like a cannon. A bomb planted near the basement ripped through the house of worship.
Okay, again, in 1963, we see the March on Washington led by Martin Luther King Jr., where he delivers his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Civil Rights Acts of 1964 were passed, which banned discrimination in employment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national orientation. Again, this will be the first of 2 Civil Rights Acts that is passed in the 60s. Again, the March on Washington, where over 200 million people gathered to listen to the famous "I Have a Dream" speech by Martin Luther King Jr. Again, known as the Million Man March. Again, we'll see the March on Selma.
A joint session of Congress to push a voting rights bill aimed at ending discrimination. It would appoint federal voting registrars in some instances and put an end to complicated literacy tests and other hampering tactics. The president referred to the events in Selma as an American tragedy. And throughout the nation, even in Canada, there were marches through the streets of towns and cities. In New York's Harlem, more than 15,000, half of them white, filed somberly through the streets in quiet but agonized protest. The events in Selma had been brought to a climax by a nighttime attack on a white Boston minister by white men. He died 2 days later, many feeling he suffered martyrdom in the cause of civil rights and voting discrimination. The next day, 4 men were held for his murder. For the Reverend James J. Reeb, the demonstrators write his epitaph with this tribute.
Okay, again, they passed the 24th Amendment, which bans poll taxes.
By wider wider margins than Democrats did. Democrats at the time, of course, were still infested with their Dixiecrats.
Okay, so again, the Voting Rights Acts will ban poll taxes, will ban literacy tests, and will not use intimidation tactics at polls. We see urban riots during this time. Again, this is a review from last week where the Kerner Commission again rules on the Cosby and white racism. We see the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.
April 4th.
Again,
He is known as one of the most influential and controversial.
Now again, when we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, two different philosophies. One, Malcolm X believed that you should use violence, and he also believed in a segregated society. And Martin Luther King believed just the opposite, with segregating society and also fighting nonviolently. And when Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated, we see a shift in radicalism with the birth of the Black Panther Party, again using aggressive tactics. And don't worry about the group activity. And that will conclude this week's notes. Make sure to review the learning objectives stated at the beginning slide.